Your F-150 has features that feel like conveniences, but they're quietly grinding down one of the most expensive parts in your truck. I'm talking about your transmission. I've spent over 15 years working on Fords, and I keep seeing the same story. A truck with 60,000 or 70,000 miles, a transmission shuddering on the 2 to 3 shift, and an owner with no idea the features they use daily are the reason. Today, 8 F-150 features secretly shortening your transmission's life. Feature 4 is one almost every owner uses without thinking, and it puts more heat through your torque converter than towing ever would. Let's get into it. Feature 8 is the one that starts almost every bad transmission story I see. The belief that your 10R80 transmission has lifetime fluid and never needs to be touched. Ford's official maintenance schedule lists the transmission fluid change interval at 150,000 miles under normal service. A lot of owners read that number, assume it means the fluid is sealed for life, and never think about it again. Here's the problem with that assumption. That 150,000 mile figure assumes light, easy driving. The moment you tow a trailer regularly, haul heavy cargo, drive in stop-and-go traffic, or live somewhere hot, you've moved into what Ford classifies as severe duty. Under severe duty, that interval should be cut dramatically, and most experienced technicians will tell you 30 to 60,000 miles is the real number if you actually use your truck like a truck. Automatic transmission fluid isn't just lubricant, it's also hydraulic fluid that controls exact clutch pack engagement, and it carries friction modifiers that let the clutches grip smoothly instead of slamming. As that fluid ages, it oxidizes, the friction modifiers break down, and the fluid loses its ability to hold consistent pressure. That's when you start feeling a shudder around 20 to 40 miles an hour or a delayed engagement when you shift into drive. I had a customer, a landscaper running a 2-ton trailer full of equipment 5 days a week, who never touched his fluid past 90,000 miles because his truck's paperwork said 150,000. By the time he brought it in for a shudder complaint, the fluid was dark brown and smelled scorched. We caught it before the clutch packs were destroyed, but only barely. A fluid and filter service on a 10R80 runs somewhere around $200 to $300. A clutch pack failure from cooked fluid can mean a rebuild in the $3,000 to $5,000 range. Don't wait for the number on a maintenance sticker that was written for a truck that never tows and never hauls. If you use your F-150 like a work truck, service that fluid every 30,000 to 60,000 miles, and check the color and smell at every oil change in between. Healthy ATF should look bright red to reddish brown and have almost no smell. If it looks like weak coffee or smells slightly burnt, that's your transmission telling you it needed attention thousands of miles ago. There's also a factory quirk worth knowing about. Several 10R80 equipped trucks have come from the assembly line with fluid levels off by a quart or more, either slightly over or under the correct amount. Since this transmission uses a sealed pan without a traditional drain plug or an easy dipstick check on many models, most owners never verify the level themselves and just trust it. An incorrect fill level changes how the clutch packs engage and can produce symptoms that look exactly like fluid degradation, even on a truck with very low mileage. When you're getting that first service done, ask your shop to confirm the fluid level is correct against the specification for your exact model year, not just top it off and send you on your way. Feature 7 is Eco Mode, and this is a setting most owners leave on permanently because it sounds like free fuel savings. Eco Mode reprograms the transmission's shift schedule to hit higher gears earlier and hold them longer, keeping engine RPM low to save fuel. On a lightly loaded truck driving around town, that's fine. The problem shows up the moment you connect a trailer or throw something heavy in the bed and forget to switch out of it. In Eco Mode, the transmission resists downshifting even when the engine is straining under load. That means your torque converter has to work harder to make up the difference, generating extra heat that gets dumped straight into the transmission fluid. Prolonged high fluid temperature is one of the single biggest killers of automatic transmissions because heat accelerates fluid breakdown far faster than mileage alone. Every 18 to 20 degrees above normal operating temperature can cut fluid life roughly in half, according to the general rule mechanics use when explaining heat-related failures to customers. So towing in Eco Mode isn't a small inefficiency, it's actively cooking your fluid faster every single trip. There's also a knock-on effect owners rarely connect to eco mode. Because the transmission is holding higher gears and lower RPM underload, the engine has to open the throttle further to produce the same power, which means more fuel is being demanded at a point in the RPM band where the engine isn't operating efficiently. So the fuel savings eco mode is supposed to deliver often don't even materialize once you're towing. You just end up with worse fuel economy and a hotter transmission at the same time, which is the worst of both outcomes. The fix is simple. Reserve eco mode for unloaded light-duty driving and get in the habit of switching to normal or tow haul mode anytime you're carrying real weight. It takes 2 seconds on the touchscreen or the console dial, and it's the single easiest change on this entire list. Which brings us to feature 6, and it's really the flip side of the same coin, never engaging tow haul mode at all. A lot of owners tow small trailers, boats, or utility loads occasionally and just leave the truck in normal mode because the trailer feels light enough that they don't think it matters. Tow haul mode does more than just change shift points. It raises the line pressure that clamps the clutch packs together, firms up shifts to reduce clutch slippage during the gear change, and adjusts the torque converter lockup schedule so the converter locks up sooner and stays locked longer. Without tow haul mode active, your transmission allows more converter slip underload, and converter slip generates heat, the same heat that's breaking down your fluid in feature 7. I've seen owners tow 5,000-pound campers in normal mode for an entire vacation because they didn't realize the button on the shifter did anything meaningful. Their transmission temperature gauge, if their truck even displays one, would have shown 30 or 40 degrees hotter than the same load in tow haul. The rule here is straightforward. Anytime you've got a trailer behind you or a genuinely heavy load in the bed, press that tow haul button. It costs you nothing, and it's specifically engineered to protect the exact components that fail first. One more thing worth knowing, tow haul mode also changes how the transmission behaves on deceleration, using engine braking through lower gears to help slow the truck and trailer down instead of relying purely on your brakes. Owners who skip tow haul on a downhill grade with a loaded trailer often end up riding the brake pedal the whole way down, which builds heat in the brakes, but they also miss out on the engine braking that would have taken some of that stopping duty away from a system that isn't sized to absorb it on its own. Get in the habit of tapping that button before you ever pull out of the driveway with anything hooked up or loaded in the bed, not after you're already 10 miles down the highway and feeling the truck struggle. Feature 5 is one that catches a lot of owners off guard because it feels completely unrelated to the transmission, ignoring your payload and gross combined weight rating. Every F-150 has a specific payload capacity listed on the door jamb sticker and a gross combined weight rating that includes the truck, passengers, cargo, and trailer all added together. Owners routinely stack tools, equipment, and gear in the bed, hook up a trailer, and never do the math. When you exceed those ratings, the transmission is working outside the parameters it was engineered and calibrated for. The torque converter has to transmit more torque than its design target, clutch packs clamp down on more resistance than they were tuned for, and the cooling system, which is sized around the factory rating, can't keep up with the extra heat being generated. I worked on a half-ton that was regularly loaded to nearly double its rated payload with steel materials for a construction side job, towing a trailer on top of that. The transmission fluid was black by 45,000 miles, and the truck needed a converter replacement by 70,000. Overloading doesn't just stress the truck's suspension and brakes, which is what most owners worry about. It puts sustained excessive load directly through the drivetrain every time you accelerate. Check your door jamb sticker, know your real numbers, and if you're consistently near or over them, it's not a light truck problem, you need a heavier duty truck problem. It's also worth remembering that payload and towing figures vary significantly between configurations. An F-150 with a 2.7-liter EcoBoost and a short bed doesn't have anywhere near the payload rating of one with the max trailer tow package and a heavy-duty payload package, even though they look identical from the outside. Owners frequently buy a truck based on the brochure's headline towing number without checking whether their specific configuration, with their specific options and passenger load, actually matches that number. Weigh your truck loaded at a public scale once, compare it to your door jamb rating, and you'll know exactly where you stand instead of guessing. If this is helping you understand what's actually going on inside your transmission, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because feature 4 is the one almost nobody thinks about, and it's happening every single time you sit at a red light. Feature 4 is your auto start-stop system, and while most people associate it with starter wear, it's also quietly working your torque converter and transmission far more than owners realize. Every time the engine shuts off at a stoplight, the torque converter unloads completely. When the engine fires back up and you release the brake, the transmission has to re-establish converter lockup and re-engage the clutch packs from essentially a cold restart of hydraulic pressure, sometimes dozens of times in a single commute. Each one of those re-engagement cycles is a small hydraulic event, a brief pressure spike as the system rebuilds line pressure and the clutch packs take up the load again. On its own, one cycle means nothing. But multiply that by every red light, every drive-through line, every bit of stop-and-go traffic day after day, year after year, and you're putting significantly more engagement cycles through those clutch packs than a transmission in a truck without start-stop would ever see. I've talked to transmission specialists who've noticed a pattern of earlier onset shift flare and clutch wear specifically in start-stop equipped trucks used heavily in city traffic, compared to highway-driven trucks with similar mileage. Ford's engineers accounted for this in the design, and for most owners in normal conditions, it's not going to cause a failure on its own. But if your transmission is already running old fluid, or you're towing regularly, or you're in stop-and-go traffic constantly, start-stop adds one more source of repeated stress on top of everything else. If you'd rather not deal with the extra engagement cycles, the button to disable it is right there on your dash, though you'll need to press it every time you start the truck since Ford doesn't allow a permanent factory disable due to EPA fuel economy testing requirements. Feature 3 is adaptive cruise control, specifically when you're towing on rolling or hilly terrain. Adaptive cruise is fantastic for maintaining following distance in traffic, but when it's fighting to hold your set speed on a grade while you're pulling a trailer, it does something most owners never notice. It commands rapid, repeated throttle and brake inputs to keep the truck locked to that exact speed. On flat highway driving, that's a non-issue. On hills with a loaded trailer, the system is constantly asking the transmission to downshift for power going uphill, then upshift and apply light braking coming back down, sometimes multiple times per mile if the terrain is rolling. That's a lot more shift cycling than a human driver typically does, because a driver tends to let speed drift a little on grades rather than chase it precisely. Every one of those extra shift events means another clutch pack engagement and another moment of torque converter slip while the gear change happens. I had a customer with a fifth wheel who drove I-70 through the mountains with adaptive cruise engaged the entire way, and by the time he got to his destination, his transmission temperature had climbed noticeably higher than it did on the same route driving manually in tow haul mode with the cruise off. My recommendation is simple. Adaptive cruise is great for flat interstate towing, but on hilly or mountainous routes with a trailer attached, take manual control of your speed and let the truck settle into a gear naturally instead of forcing constant micro adjustments. If your truck has a manual gear selection mode on the shifter or paddle shifters, this is exactly the situation to use it in. Locking the transmission into a specific gear for a long climb or descent takes the guesswork out of the equation entirely. The transmission stops hunting for the ideal gear altogether, and you get consistent, predictable behavior instead of a system that's constantly second-guessing itself against the terrain. Feature 2 is a habit rather than a button, but it belongs on this list because I see it wreck transmissions regularly, shifting into neutral while coasting to a stop or rolling down long hills to save gas. Some older school drivers picked up this habit from manual transmission days or from urban legends about fuel savings, and it carries over into modern automatics without owners realizing how differently a 10R80 handles that input. When you shift from drive to neutral and back to drive while the truck is still rolling, you're forcing the transmission to disengage and then re-engage the clutch packs while the vehicle has momentum working against the driveline. That re-engagement under rolling load creates a sharper hydraulic and mechanical shock than a normal stop-to-start engagement from a complete stop. Do this occasionally and nothing happens. Do it as a daily habit, especially coming down long hills where you're building speed in neutral and then dropping back into gear, and you're introducing repeated shock loading directly to the clutch packs and the output shaft. Modern fuel injection doesn't burn meaningfully less fuel in neutral coasting versus staying in gear with your foot off the throttle anyway, so there's no real benefit to offset the wear. If this is a habit you picked up somewhere along the way, it's an easy one to break, and your transmission will thank you for it. The same principle applies to bump shifting into drive before the truck has fully stopped rolling backward on a hill, or shoving the shifter into reverse while there's still forward momentum on the vehicle. Anytime you're asking the transmission to change direction or re-engage while the truck still has momentum working against that command, you're loading the clutch packs and the output shaft with a shock they weren't designed for on a regular basis. Give the truck a full stop before you change direction every time, and let the transmission make its clutch engagements the way it was designed to. Which brings us to feature 1, and this is the one that turns a cheap fix into an expensive one more often than anything else on this list. Ignoring early shift shutter, harsh shifts, or a check engine light instead of getting it looked at. Ford actually released a technical service bulletin, 18-2079, specifically addressing 10 R80 transmissions built before August of 2017 that exhibited harsh or delayed shifts along with an illuminated check engine light and code P0711, which relates to a transmission fluid temperature sensor performance issue. The fix in that case was a software reprogram of the transmission control module, a repair that typically takes under an hour and costs very little if you're still under warranty, or a modest diagnostic and reprogramming fee if you're not. The problem is that most owners feel a slightly harsh shift or notice a shudder around highway speed, and they just live with it because the truck still drives. They assume it's normal for a modern 10-speed, or they've heard from a friend or a forum that all these transmissions do that. Sometimes that's true, and it's a simple software concern like the one addressed in that bulletin. But sometimes, early shudder is the first sign of clutch pack wear or degraded fluid, and every mile you drive on it afterward accelerates the damage. A shudder you ignore for 6 months isn't a shudder anymore by the time you bring it in. It's often a torque converter that needs replacing, or clutch packs that are already scored. The transmission is designed to tell you something is wrong long before it actually fails completely. Trust that signal. If you feel a hesitation on takeoff, a shudder in the 20 to 40 miles per hour range, a harsh clunk into gear, or you see any check engine light at all, get it scanned. A 15-minute diagnostic scan is the cheapest insurance policy you'll ever buy for a transmission that costs thousands to replace. Your F-150's transmission is genuinely one of the more capable pieces of engineering in the truck, built to handle towing, hauling, and daily commuting for hundreds of thousands of miles when it's treated right. But it's also sensitive to heat, sensitive to fluid condition, and sensitive to how many times a day you're asking those clutch packs to engage and disengage. None of these 8 things will kill your transmission overnight. What they do is stack small amounts of extra heat and extra wear on top of each other, year after year, until a truck that should have gone 200,000 miles without a transmission problem needs a rebuild at 80,000 instead. Go check your fluid, know your payload numbers, use tow haul when you're supposed to, and don't ignore a shudder. If you found this useful, subscribe, hit the bell, and let me know in the comments which of these 8 you didn't know about. And if you want to see exactly how far a neglected transmission can go before it finally gives out, I've got a full teardown video on a 10 R80 with over 220,000 miles that never had a single fluid service coming up next. I'll see you in that one.